All right, we have another episode of Tailwind. Today we're joined by Brent Phillips. Brent, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thanks, Austin. I appreciate the invite today. As we spoke about before, my professional background really has been in the corporate world. I've worked for pretty large global corporations, running global sales teams from North and South America, even across the globe. Global key account management roles. I've run a variety of business units that have all been globally focused and so forth. So I had a super rewarding corporate career for about 30 years. And then I got an itch. It was time for me to do something different. And I went out on a limb. And a couple of years ago, I started my own small business. Um, it's sales acceleration. Then my LLC is called BWP Consulting Group. And I focus on working with small and mid-sized businesses to help them grow a path for more sales. So essentially, what these companies do is they hire me as a fractional sales executive. So they hire somebody with my experience and background as an expert to come in and work with them on a part-time basis to build out their sales organization, processes, and team to really set them up to scale their business effectively. It's been incredibly rewarding. I've worked with just a vast array of different industries, and different business owners, and it's been a really rewarding career.
Nice. I know we talked about, we're going to do networking as the conversation for the day, and I'm really looking forward to it. But out of curiosity, was there a certain moment that itch hit, like something that happened in your career? You just woke up one day ready to start your own business? Kind of what led to that?
Yeah, it's corporate, right? And I worked for a great company for a long time. It grew a lot, and it grew to the point where inevitably there's more processes and procedures that get put in place. And I always was pretty entrepreneurial, and I had the unique opportunity to really run kind of an entrepreneurial types of businesses, and so forth. So as that entrepreneurialism, as the company grew, began to shrink a bit, it was time for me to move on and do something fresh and new, and start over. So that was really kind of one of the key drivers that led me to where I am today.
Yeah, nice. I'm always curious what causes other people to get that bug, and one makes sense. You
Yeah, I
tasted the
mean,
sweet
of
fruit,
course,
and
there's
then
issues of corporate restructuring and
yeah,
all that was involved. The company was consolidating and moving its headquarters from North Carolina to Michigan at the time. There's a lot of restructuring going on and new management that was in place and so forth. So it was time. I had 25-year career with one company, for example, and great experience, but it was time.
yeah. And so you mentioned that one of the things that you do with sales acceleration is you help grow the path to more revenue. And we've talked about how networking is incredibly important for that. Tell us a little bit more about why that's the case.
Yeah, it's interesting because networking is my business development activity.
Mhm.
Um, Number one, companies need to be at a unique point in their growth and trajectory. They need to have an issue with sales and recognize that issue. Often it's due to scalability. They've grown the company to the point where the owner has so passionate about the business. Most owners, don't necessarily have a professional sales background like myself, but they're passionate and they're committed, and that comes through so strongly for their customers. But it gets to the point as they scale their business where they can't do everything anymore. They've got to let others, um, take over lead roles with expertise. So that's often when I step in. And with what I do, it's a matter, it's all based on trust. They've got to trust me that I'm going to come in and be a force multiplier for their business, strongly maintain their culture and those types of things. So how do you do that? How do you transfer that trust? And how do you find those unique opportunities with those select clients? And I found that by networking with other professionals, it's been eye-opening to me. There's a whole ecosystem of small business professionals like myself that focus on supporting on a fractional basis different aspects of small and mid-sized businesses. Things like fractional CFOs, fractional HR people, a wide variety and ecosystem. And often, when they're in working with clients, they become aware that, hey, there's a sales issue here, or the owner has set certain signals um, that they need some support, or maybe they're getting ready to hire the first salesperson, and oh man, how do you do that? What's their comp plan look like? How does that whole thing work? Uh, so through building a network over time and having that trust and understanding with other referral partners, they understand what I do intimately, I understand what they do intimately, then we become a force multiplier. And they're able to introduce me to the business owner. And by doing so, I mean, they're transferring the trust they've built to me in that case. That's a big deal. And that doesn't happen through one conversation. It happens through a consistent effort over time. But when you get a referral to a client like that, a 70, 80% chance that that opportunity is going to ultimately close. Uh, versus direct outreach, is more difficult. Even with the vast array of AI tools, that human touch and that trust still is really relevant. So
Yeah.
my business development activities are focused around that networking, and it's proven to work quite well.
And so, how is that different than the corporate setting? Because you were mentioning that that would be is also an important place to be using your network in.
Yes, that's a great question. And, networking, I think, is very valuable in a corporate setting. And it's one I didn't do enough of. And looking back on my career, I regret it. There were some lost opportunities there that I wish I would have taken advantage of. Often you're not, most companies you're kind of in that daily grind, and, you know, the to-do list is much longer than the hours in the day. Um, Most cultures in larger companies don't necessarily encourage it, which I think is a mistake now that I look back. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why is it relevant for corporate manager to network, for example? Number one, it keeps them fresh. If they get out and they network with peers and peers and maybe in similar jobs in totally different industries, for example, you learn some best practices, you learn some tools, you learn, a different perspective. That tunnel vision that often happens internally is kind of broken, and you have a broader view, and you're able to bring those ideas back. Every company is always looking for new ideas to be better, and by going to your peers out there in other industries, for example, you're able to kind of bring those fresh ideas in. It's also motivational, and it breaks that kind of daily grind. It leads to less burnout, keeps things fresh, and that keeps you more motivated. And really good folks in the business world know how much they don't know.
Yeah.
And right. And by getting out there and talking with others in the industry, um, it really drives that whole continuous learning initiative, which has always been a motivator for me.
Mhm.
It's one thing I've loved about having my own business. I've worked in such a vast array of businesses. I mean, my background's manufacturing, but I've worked in, insurance clients, construction clients, engineered service clients, you name it. Um, and so that's pretty motivational. So I think that's relevant from that perspective. And it's a low cost, almost no cost really, continuous learning initiative that companies can embrace. And there's a lot of organizations out there, like in the case of CEOs, Vistage is one. It's
Mhm.
a peer-to-peer group. I'm a part of it as a trusted advisor, and it provides a sounding board, a safe sounding board for new ideas and challenges that you don't necessarily have. Use that power out there of others who have been through similar situations to help. Um, so those are some examples, I think, from a corporate manager perspective. And really good managers want to develop their people, and I would encourage, managers to be out there and also encourage their team if they want to. Don't force them to do it. But if they want to, get out there and network a bit, whether it be industry events, for example, or networking events. There's a lot of networking events that people can sign up and go to,
Mhm.
that are out there. Things like chambers of commerce, or I live in the Detroit area. The Detroit Economic Club is a fantastic opportunity to network with some movers and shakers that are out there and those types of things. So it's an overlooked thing. And as I mentioned before, I didn't do enough of it when I was in the corporate world. And looking back, I
Yeah.
wish I would. I think it would have um, really made me, even more successful in those roles that I had in corporate.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, so you're an individual that's look here listening in, like, okay, you kind of got my attention with this, or like you're the manager thinking about their team, you know,
Hmm.
and the continuous learning aspect of it, like that whole part. I'm just thinking of myself being in a corporate role. When I'd be told like, hey, go to a networking event, I'd be like, no way, I'm not gonna go talk to
Right.
strangers. I don't know what's in it for me. I'm doing my job really well. I work hard.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really add value, I don't think, for anybody, which is wrong. I look back and I go, I agree with you.
Right.
What's your advice, practical advice for managers that are looking at their team and going, how do I get them out there? How do I get everyone in my organization kind of on this train and willing to do this networking?
Great question. And I think number one, it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
Inevitably, it's simply not. But it is for many people. And for those that are willing to put themselves out there and challenge themselves and put themselves in a little bit more of an uncomfortable situation, you learn a lot about yourself, and the manager learns a lot about the employee. That they're willing to take some risk and chances out there, that they're willing to put it out there, and their professional growth is important to them to some degree, even if it puts them in a situation where it's not a natural fit. I mean, in my case, I hope, I've been involved in sales roles since I graduated from college a few years ago. I'm not a natural networker. It's not a natural state for me. I had to learn to do it, and it didn't come naturally, and I kind of just had to put it out there. The more I did it, and I saw the benefit in it, on the other hand, then it became quite motivational for me in that case. So my suggestion for corporate managers is make it an option. You'll be surprised who may step up and do it. Um, and networking starts small, one or two events, one or two connections on LinkedIn. Keep it simple, keep it small, and just get out there and make it happen. And I'm not talking just sales roles here by any stretch. I mean,
Yeah.
any division or in a company, any part of the organization really can benefit from this. And so that's interesting too, because you learn about folks that maybe are willing to put it out there that you wouldn't have thought about that. You learn something about them, they learn something about themselves. And ultimately, they bring new ideas back that are fresh.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important too. It's a continuous learning tool. It's inexpensive and it's motivational for the right employees. But there's some coaching that's involved. There's some best practices. We can talk about that maybe a little later in the podcast, on how to even get started with something like that. Um, but I think at least creating the option, creating the openness and the opportunity for folks to get out there and expand their professional skill set, that means a lot.
Mhm.
It's more than just what they're doing on the day-to-day job, but you care about them developing professionally and personally as well.
Yeah, I think, from my perception, for at least myself and for other folks that I've seen be hesitant around it, it's what do I do once I get there? So when you mentioned like, talking about best practices or how to approach going to these events and getting something out of them and
Right.
feeling comfortable with it, I'd be curious what you have for us on that front.
Yeah, and again, you just kind of need to get started small, and it's gonna be in a little bit of an uncomfortable situation at first because it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a natural state. Oh, one other benefit too is
Yeah.
you learn how to represent yourself, but also represent your company, and it's going to really hone your communication skills, which is only going to benefit
Hmm.
you as an individual or you as a manager throughout the career. That was, I think, another key point of why it matters. But how do you do it is your question. And um, for example, there's a lot of networking events. Like there's a group called the Excel Networking Group that was started by a group of folks that are professionals like myself that are out there. And it started during COVID, as I understand it, where networking just changed
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, let's build a group together, and of professionals and get together, and then it grew. And they have one kind of person per discipline on their board, and then they have events that are public events. And these events you go to are like 250 people.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. It's like a who's who of there's business owners that are there, there's tons of other professionals that are there, and it's funny, you start to network and you meet a couple people and you quickly get introduced to a couple more people and then a couple more people, and it inevitably grows in and of itself. And then from that, a lot of these people do a lot of time networking and they'll say, hey, you're in, industry logistics, for example. Have you joined the local transportation club of America, for example? They have their own network, and that's an industry specific opportunity. And maybe one of the board members happens to be there. Oh, hey, guess who's here? Why don't I introduce you to, so and so who happens to be a board member for this organization? And then boom, suddenly you've gotten introduced to a very industry specific with potential customers there, other organizations, different service providers, vendor relationships can grow from there and that kind of thing. So it starts small and then inevitably it will organically grow. Austin, does that specifically answer your question enough?
It does. I was curious too, though. Like, do you have a recommendation on like certain networking event? You know, like Vistage, for instance, one networking company or networking organization. Excel,
Yep.
another one. Are there any ones that like if somebody's listening in, they're going, all right, I'm gonna bite the bullet. This one's like one for newbies, or like this one's where like it's really friendly and structured, so you don't have to sit there and be like, all right, I gotta work up the courage to go talk to five people I don't know and like have it compound.
Yeah. Oh boy, there's a ton that are out there.
Okay.
There's Chamber of Commerces are a good place to start.
Yeah.
um, Go to an event, and they have a lot of events that are network focused and that are designed to build networks. They structure the luncheon around networks. That's a low cost way, and typically you don't have to be a member. You can just join.
Mhm.
So that's one. There's also national organizations that are online called, like, say, Alignable, for example, and they connect folks that are in various disciplines, and you can put a profile in there, and then what types of folks would you like to be contacted with. And within Alignable there's often um, different chairs, like the county I live in, for example, has like 4 or 5 different chairs depending on where you live through Alignable. So inevitably you learn who that chair is, or maybe they'll even reach out to you and they'll invite you to a networking event, for example. And so you go and you meet a few folks and have a few conversations and break that ice. And it's interesting, what leads from there. So that would be another organization.
Yeah.
Um, One of the best practices that I did is I actually started my own referral partner group of other professionals that are out there, and that's been incredibly rewarding. As I got out there and began to network, and you can also network just over Zoom, like
Yeah.
like what we're doing now. Um, Connect on LinkedIn. I mean, look at your LinkedIn contacts and so you haven't been in touch with in 2 or 3 years. Reach out to them and say, hey, how's it going? And I'd be interested to learn more about your business. Can we set up 30 minutes for a call? Um, and then when you're on the call, inevitably, who else can you introduce them to that would be relevant? Who can they introduce you to? That's another way to do it. Um, and then if it's somebody you really click with, then maybe you set up coffee with them as a follow-up step, for example. And then through that, I did a lot of that initially, and sort of people you click with, people who are in complementary service providers who have a similar, in my case, and a similar ideal client profile, which is small businesses, revenue up to about, from $1 million to, say, $50 million. And then I started to invite them into my own group,
Mhm.
and we meet every few weeks. Um, a lot of it is just networking, and I have one person per seat at the table, one discipline per seat, and we talk about, okay, what are challenges that we're facing, what are opportunities that are out there, what are some wins that are out there, And we learn intimately what each other does in terms of their business offering. And that makes it more relevant. It's not just can they refer me to a client, but maybe even more importantly, can I refer them to a client? If I'm in
Yeah.
working with a client, they have a need, they have a major cybersecurity gap. I've got a cybersecurity specialist that's in there, and that's all they do, and they manage cybersecurity for small businesses. I learned a fun fact, which isn't so fun, that insurance companies, companies think I have cybersecurity insurance, I'm good.
Yeah.
Those companies only pay out less than 20% of the claims. Why? Because compliance didn't happen. There's a whole list of things that need to happen in order to qualify for the insurance. And so what my referral partner does is they they ensure the compliance is there. And then if there is a claim, and it's shocking how often it happens, I mean, the amount of cybersecurity threats that are out there are huge, then his company will step in and represent them to the insurance company and say, here's all your documentation. Here's all the training that was done. Here is how we sent out emails to test if people were responding to the email properly and reporting it as phishing and that kind of thing. And then their claim rate is basically 100%
Yeah.
as an example. So those are some of the advantages, and we all get brought to the table. And I've gotten clients from it. I've been able to refer others who have gained clients from it. That's ultimately, where it goes. But then you've got a whole network of other peers out there. Best practices. I've got a challenge in a certain industry. I reach out to a couple of my peers out there and say, hey, have you done something similar to this? I've done joint engagements with some of my peers in that group where, I had a client that was looking to grow into the North American market, for example, and it was a combination of both, setting up sales and marketing and a go-to-market strategy, but it was also a logistics play. I mean, how are they going to get the product effectively here and cut those lead times from elsewhere in the world where they were? And so I brought in a supply chain specialist, and he and I were a force multiplier in terms of adding value to a client. So that's like a best practice that I found specifically to having my own small business.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit as you're going through those. It was super helpful. But out of curiosity, do you have a recommendation on, hey, what are the agendas to set every time for, doing a Zoom call versus having like a group versus, walking up to somebody at an event and introducing yourself just to say hi?
Yeah, the approach is a little different for each one. Let's talk about, Zoom call, for example.
Yeah.
So I've been introduced, let's just hypothetically here, I've been introduced to another fractional person who's an HR person, for example. The one thing that I really strive to do is, it's a 30-minute call. I strive to have at least 20 minutes where I'm learning about their business, um, and how their business is relevant, and what niches they have and who their client base is and so forth. And inevitably, I offer to help. Having that help first mentality
Mhm.
is really key in terms of that approach. So, how can I help them? Who can I introduce them to? Number one, I sincerely want to help folks. I mean,
Yeah.
I drive satisfaction from that. And number two, that resonates with folks too. You help them, they inevitably feel, and want to reciprocate that help to a great degree. So
Yeah.
that builds trust. So usually for a first call, I spend the majority of my time learning sincerely about their business. What's their unique go-to-market strategy? Who are their ideal clients? How long have they been in business? What are some of their big business challenges? How do they do business development? Um, what are some of the best networking groups and networking opportunities that they've been involved with? And you learn that way. And then ultimately say, okay, who in my network can I introduce you to? How can I help your business grow? Um, and then usually the last 5 minutes, you're like, oh, we haven't even talked about you. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then hopefully that leads to a second conversation, maybe over coffee, for example. Or you set up another Zoom meeting, and having that contact over time, in that consistency of contact, that's really important to have that consistency of contact, because one great call out of sight, out of mind. And you need to complement it with other business development activities. I spend a lot of time on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I try to post, a couple times a week, relevant content to stay relevant. Um, keep in touch in a variety of different ways. And reposting the content or reposting recognition for my referral partners out there
Mhm.
is another thing. Number one, I want to celebrate their success. And number two, anything to do to keep top of mind that's relevant. So the example I gave you there is really heavily related to my own. You're not necessarily going to do that fully as a corporate
Yeah.
manager per se, but as a small business owner and someone who focuses um, on that business development and networking. And for most small businesses, and I'm not talking just in the consultant space, I'm talking construction, insurance, other things. I mean, networking is how business development is done, and that's how you get business, and that's how you get clients.
Mhm. And so, what about in person and group?
Yeah, so I think in person, there are some similarities, of course. Obviously, you got to be comfortable enough just to say, hey,
Yeah,
nice
right.
to meet you. I'm Brent Phillips, and you know, tell me a little bit about yourself, um, kind of thing, and what your specialty is, and what motivates you. Um, I try and stay away from the "what do you do" question. I try and reframe it a little bit differently, but inevitably it's the same thing. But again, you want to sincerely learn about their business, what they do. Sometimes it's been interesting because I've had business opportunities come up thinking it's a referral partner.
Mhm.
As they learn about what I do, then they call me back and say, "Hey, I need some help to scale my business." So I've had referral partners turn into clients also in that regard. But you need to be concise. The key and number one thing is what's your elevator pitch? And that's
Mhm.
true and it should be practiced. AI is helpful to put it together as well and try different pitches. Um, what's relevant from that perspective? Your pitch should include, essentially a very concise message. I mean, my shortest pitch, for example, is, hi, I'm Brent Phillips, and I work with small and mid-sized businesses to help them grow a path for more sales.
That's
Well,
good.
that's a short one.
Yeah.
Got a little longer one. That's how do I do that? But that requires some practice, and I think getting your arms around your elevator pitch really is one of the most important things. And don't make it too complex. Don't make it too
Mhm.
long. Something that can resonate. And as I mentioned, practice it on your spouse, on your significant other, on coworkers, or other referral partners that you trust, and support them to refine that. So I think that's then you also have more confidence
Yeah.
in going into a setting like that when they ask you what you do, um, and how you're relevant. And then I would recommend that folks ask open-ended, sincere, probing questions.
Mhm.
Have that curiosity and that continuous learning mindset. Um, you know, People who are curious tend to do far better in life than people who are not. Again, I mentioned it earlier. I had a professor in college, great professor in college, and as I had my last semester senior year, and a comment he made resonated with to our class resonated with me. He said, "If you've learned anything while you've been in college, when you walk out these doors, you appreciate how much you don't know, not how much you know."
Yeah.
And that has been sort of a core of how I've um, taken an approach to my business career and how it's developed. And I felt it always kept me humble, and it always kept me grounded. And I got a lot of benefit out of just being curious.
Yeah. I think another thing in my experience as well with networking in person is everyone's there for the same thing. So like if you show up and you say, "Hey, my name's Austin," like it's like, yeah, we're all here to talk. It's not like you're intruding on some sort of space that you weren't invited to. It's like we're all there to network. So network.
exactly. You know, it's a good point actually, because I recall the first networking event that I went to. Um, and it was like a little bit, I never want to interfere with somebody's conversation, right? You know,
Yeah.
and so network, you kind of need to, and that's okay because they're there to network. And so I finally had somebody else who was also getting started with their career. Um, and she's like, go ahead, join our conversation, no problem, you
Yeah.
know? And from that, she and I have developed a strong referral partner, network. And in fact, she just won a great award. I was happy to help her celebrate, um, and repost on LinkedIn recently. And yeah, and people are there to help. And it's not all on you. And that's a good point. It's not all on you by any stretch. And people are there to network. And there's people who are professional networkers. They're amazing at
Yeah.
it. And inevitably, you're going to get introduced to some of these master networkers. And then boom, they introduce you to key people. And it's really cool. It's really cool.
All right. I know we're coming up on time, but I got two more questions because I
Go
don't want to
for it.
miss out on these ones. So the last one is, we got the best practices for Zoom, best practices in person, and then if you're gonna join a group or be part of a group, or sorry, or create your own group, give you any recommendations on that, or is it pretty similar to the other two?
I'm sorry. Can you rephrase the question, Austin?
Hmm. Like how you'd structure a meeting if you're doing like, hey, let's start a networking group. There's not one locally here that's really fitting the need or whatever. So I want to put together a meeting agenda and bring people in and run those groups. Any recommendations
Gotcha.
on
Yep. I try and keep it simple
that?
and not pack too much in the agenda, but what's relevant in the agenda. I plan for 2 hours, okay? And the first half hour is just networking. Give everybody, and usually it's longer. So give everybody kind of an opportunity to introduce what they do, um, and talk a little bit about their their own focus, their own practice, what they do, and who their ideal clients are, for example. That's really key. And try and liven it up a little bit, like, what's one big success you've had, you know, in the last 3 months you want to talk about, or what's one of your biggest struggles you want to talk about. That leads to some pretty interesting discussions because inevitably says, oh, I've had the same issue. At the beginning of a calendar year, it's like, okay, or the end of a calendar year, one of the topics I always like to have, what are your goals for the
Mhm.
upcoming year? And how can this group help you achieve those goals? What can we do to have you be more successful?
Yeah.
That becomes a pretty meaty conversation. Sometimes then as well, we'll have um, one of the members of the group will also then do either a workshop or a presentation on their business. What do a really deep dive so people have an intimate understanding of it. And how do they work with business owners when they come in? Maybe how do they conduct workshops with business owners and so forth. My next referral partner meeting, we've got an executive coach in our group. And Chris and I were talking, and I said, hey, Chris, why don't you come in and do a leadership workshop for us? Conduct it as if we're a client. And he was all over doing that. And so, what's the benefit for the whole group? I mean, the whole group comes in because we're learning, new meeting best practices, how to conduct these workshops. He'll tailor the topics that are relevant for our group. And then inevitably, we're going to walk out of there better armed with opportunities because we all do workshops with our clients. So maybe leading edge stuff, so that kind of breaks things up a little bit, as well. Um, and then I really strongly encourage, particularly for new members that are just coming in, after that meeting, schedule one-on-ones with everybody. Have a one-on-one Zoom meeting afterwards to be able to do a deeper dive in that regard. Um, and a lot of thought goes into the disciplines and the people that are invited, and that's a key thing that I need to do
Yeah.
is kind of pre-screen folks and what they do. Um, but you invite somebody new into the group who brings a unique focus and a discipline, and they're like, oh, the business opportunities come out of it immediately. Um, it's really cool, and it takes a little while, and it takes some discipline in order to make that happen. But I rent a conference room at the at the Civic Center locally. Costs
Mhm.
me $50 for 2 hours, so it's not a big financial lift. And then inevitably, I ask somebody to pick up a box of Starbucks coffee, and we're good to go.
Yeah, that's all I need.
And the feedback consistently is really positive. So the agenda is simple. Networking, give people an opportunity to talk, highlight a business, and then encourage follow-up one-on-ones afterwards.
That's great.
So that's it.
Well, Brent, this was a very thorough overview of networking and practical application in there. I think for me, if you can maintain curiosity and generosity throughout the process, the rest will start to fall into place. But make sure you listen to the whole thing because there was a bunch of good advice in there as well. Before I let you go, if somebody's listening in, like, what's the one big takeaway that you'd want them to walk away with if they could only take one?
Just get out there and do it.
Let's do it.
Just get out there and do it. And as uncomfortable as it may seem, the rewards are enormous. And I'm not talking just about small business owners like myself. I'm talking about, people in the corporate space. You will grow personally and professionally in ways that you can't imagine. So that's it. There we have
Yeah.
it.
Brent, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing some of the wisdom with us.
Austin, thanks for the invite. I appreciate being part of Tailwinds, and keep up the good work and the good podcasts, and look forward to staying in touch.
For sure.